that these conversations are happening is a good sign, right? I take note of the Prime Minister's comments that the bulk of their discussion, I'm paraphrasing, but the bulk of their discussion focuses now on the sectoral tariffs.
The trade standoff between Canada and the United States has many moving parts, but at its core lies one of the most important sectors in the Canadian economy, the auto industry. In the weeks since President Trump raised tariffs on Canadian goods outside of CUSMA from 25% to 35% on August 1st, the focus of negotiations has shifted directly to the hardest-hit sectors. That list includes steel, aluminum, copper, and most importantly, autos. Prime Minister Mark Carney has spoken with Trump twice in the past week. Officials in Ottawa describe the renewed conversations as a positive signal, because for weeks after the August deadline, there was silence. Now the question is whether these talks can translate into relief for industries like auto manufacturing, which sits at the center of Canada's economic and political landscape.
So we're looking now, given that we've got the best deal, to really focus in on those strategic sectors and prepare the groundwork for that broader discussion on CUSMA. That's what we're doing.
Autos are not just another export, they are a cornerstone of Canada's cross-border economy. According to Statistics Canada, Canada exported more than $412 billion worth of goods to the United States in 2024, and automobiles made up a large share of that total. Hundreds of thousands of Canadian jobs depend on assembly lines and part suppliers that are tightly integrated with factories in Michigan and Ohio. Tariffs on the metals that go into cars are already driving up costs. The 50% tariff on aluminum and steel that Washington imposed earlier this summer is squeezing the price of frames and chassis. The 35% tariff on non-CUSMA Canadian goods raises costs even further when components do not meet strict rules of origin. Mexico, meanwhile, has been granted a 90-day delay on new tariffs, creating another layer of competitive pressure. Canadian producers find themselves paying more while their rivals to the south face fewer immediate restrictions. The risk is not abstract. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation has warned that sustained tariffs could reduce U.S. sales and cut into Canada's export numbers as well. At home, the pressure is building. Economists point out that Canada's economy contracted by 0.4% in the second quarter of 2025, with exports to the United States showing the sharpest decline. Inflation is holding at 1.7% year over year, a manageable figure, but the weakness in growth adds urgency to the debate. Carney's challenge is to project steady leadership in front of Canadians while also responding quickly enough to prevent job losses in sectors like auto manufacturing. Commentators describe his approach as calm and capable, but they also caution that leadership must be proven with action. Canadians want more than words. They want to see policies that protect wages, keep factories running, and give certainty to workers whose livelihoods are on the line. This is why the upcoming fall budget is so critical. Carney has described it as both an austerity budget and an investment budget, a mix that sparked debate. On one side, fiscal discipline is needed to stabilize Canada's finances. On the other, investment must support industries facing immediate threats. The auto sector is at the top of that list. Federal initiatives, from battery manufacturing to electric vehicle production, could help protect jobs while tariffs remain in place. Critics argue the government has moved too slowly, but supporters point to steps such as the Major Projects Office in Alberta, created to speed investment. The test will come when Canadians see whether Ottawa can deliver tangible support for auto plants and suppliers. People already accept that Trump is unpredictable. What they expect is for their own government to shield industries from the fallout. If Ottawa can secure tariff relief or offset damage with targeted investment, confidence in Carney's leadership will grow. If not, the pressure of lost jobs and higher costs could quickly shift the political balance. Canada's auto industry now stands as the measure of whether calm leadership can be turned into results.
The Trump administration expanding tariffs on steel and aluminum imports on Monday. The move adds a 50% tariff rate on more than 400 goods with steel and aluminum components.
It's going to mean higher canned food prices across the board for American consumers.
In mid-August, the White House dropped another surprise. Tariffs on steel and aluminum did not just double from 25 to 50% earlier this summer. They now cover more than 400 additional goods that contain these metals. Importers had no grace period. Products already on ships heading toward U.S. ports were instantly more expensive the moment the policy took effect. The list is long and familiar: wires and cables, car parts, home appliances, electronics, even soda cans, items that millions of Americans use every single day. For consumers, it means higher bills. For companies, it means uncertainty, because no one knows which category of goods might be targeted next. This sudden expansion shows how fast trade policy under President Trump can reshape the ground under households and industries alike. The impact is already visible in the numbers. According to the Producer Price Index released in late July, the price of domestic steel mill products was nearly 9% higher than a year earlier. Aluminum was up more than 13%. These are not abstract figures. They are costs that flow straight into the price tags of cars, refrigerators, and packaged food on grocery store shelves. Factories across the Midwest are feeling the strain.
Primary aluminum is something that's always going to be imported into the United States, no matter what kind of tariffs you put on whatever it is.
Manufacturers that rely on imported aluminum face higher costs, and they point out that certain types are not produced in the United States, so the tariffs add expense without offering a local alternative. Smaller firms cannot absorb the increases the way global corporations can. As they scale back, entire communities lose the stable jobs that have sustained American families for decades. Instead of sparking a manufacturing boom, the tariffs are placing new pressure on the very towns they were meant to protect. Across the border, Canada has been moving in the opposite direction.
We must reinforce our strength at home. Canada will be introducing a series of countermeasures to protect Canadian steel and aluminum workers and producers.
Ottawa responded quickly when Washington first raised tariffs earlier this year. By March, Canada had imposed its own 25% counter tariffs on about 30 billion Canadian dollars worth of U.S. goods, covering steel, aluminum, and a wide range of consumer products. But Canada did not stop there. It introduced tariff rate quotas that limit how much foreign steel can enter the country, and expanded procurement rules so that only Canadian firms or trusted partners can bid on government projects requiring steel and aluminum. The government also prepared financial support for major aluminum producers if U.S. tariffs remain in place, ensuring that companies like Rio Tinto can maintain operations and jobs. This approach has a clear goal. While tariffs raise costs, Canada is using the moment to strengthen its domestic industry, protect workers, and stabilize supply chains. Ottawa is signaling that it will not simply accept American pressure. It is defending its own market while keeping its industrial core intact. The contrast is striking. In the United States, tariffs were sold as a promise to bring jobs back and make industry stronger. Yet the evidence so far points in the other direction. Higher steel and aluminum costs are feeding into inflation, squeezing companies and forcing layoffs at manufacturing firms that rely on imported metals. For American households, everyday purchases from canned food to family cars are becoming more expensive. Canada, meanwhile, has acted quickly and decisively to protect its own producers. Rather than being cornered, it has turned the trade shock into an opportunity to reinforce its industry. The result is a tale of two strategies. One is creating turbulence for consumers and manufacturers at home. The other is building resilience in the face of pressure. This is the test of tariff politics. Pushed too far, short-term protection ends up hurting the very workers it promised to defend. Trump's trade policy now shows how protection can backfire, raising costs at home while unsettling global commerce.
All right, let's talk tariffs and coffee, because President Trump's newest round of tariffs could make your morning cup of coffee more expensive.
Brazil, the largest supplier of coffee to the United States, its exports now face a 50% tariff into America.
For most Americans, coffee is a daily necessity. The U.S. consumes between 450 and 560 million cups every day, and about one-third of that comes from Brazil. In 2024 alone, Brazil shipped more than 8 million 60-kilogram bags, worth around $1.9 billion. For decades, those beans entered duty-free. That has now changed. President Trump's new tariffs impose a 50% tax on Brazilian coffee. A 50-pound bag that cost $147 now lands at nearly $360. Prices are projected to climb 15 to 20%, pushing a $16 pound into the 20s. This shock raises a central question. If Brazil reduces exports to the U.S. and turns toward Canada, what challenges will America face, and what opportunities will Canada seize?
Against all odds, 100% American-grown coffee.
We have multiple canyons where we grow coffee.
A drop in the bucket, Omar, because again, it's only 1% of coffee consumed in the United States that's produced here.
You would think it would be a great opportunity for all American beans, but other nations can deliver a product just as good for a fraction of the cost.
The American coffee sector is enormous. According to the National Coffee Association, it supports 2.2 million jobs and contributes $343 billion annually to the economy. Losing a supply stream worth $1.9 billion from Brazil threatens more than importers. It threatens an entire chain of employment. For companies on the ground, the math is brutal. A bag that once cost under $150 now costs more than double. Industry estimates suggest every cup could climb by another 20 to 25 cents within just a few months. Consumers already paid 15% more for roasted coffee in mid-2025 compared with a year earlier. Demand, however, is unyielding. People may switch brands or blends, but they rarely stop drinking. That is why the supply shock is so severe. Brazil is not the only source under pressure. Switzerland, a major exporter of roasted coffee to the U.S., also faces higher tariffs. With two leading suppliers hit at once, the American market risks both price inflation and genuine shortage. What happens if Brazil, faced with a 50% tariff in the U.S., decides to divert more of its beans to Canada instead? While the U.S. raises barriers, Canada has kept its doors open. Brazilian coffee enters Canada at a zero tariff. In the first half of 2025, Brazil's exports to Canada increased by 25% to a record level, with coffee among the country's key export items. For Brazil, the logic is straightforward. If the American market is blocked, Canada becomes a natural alternative. For Canada, the benefits are immediate. Importers gain access to beans at stable prices. Domestic consumers face less inflationary pressure. Canada strengthens its position as a reliable partner for the world's top coffee exporter. This diversion of trade is not symbolic. It means beans that once arrived at U.S. ports are now redirected into Canadian supply chains. That shift could alter the balance of coffee trade in North America for years to come. If Brazil decides to prioritize Canada, the U.S. risks losing its status as the #1 buyer. Supply contracts and logistics, once moved, are not easily reversed. Even a 10% contraction in the industry could represent tens of billions in lost value across jobs, retail, and hospitality. Canada, meanwhile, emerges as a confident counterweight. By maintaining zero tariffs, it positions itself as the North American hub for Brazilian coffee. What began as a reaction to U.S. policy may become a lasting structural change. Trump's tariffs were meant to project strength, but coffee is not an industry America can replace at home. By pricing Brazilian beans out of the market, Washington may have handed its neighbor a lasting advantage. And that morning cup, once a simple routine, now reflects the far-reaching consequences of trade policy on everyday life.